Should be good. So Lenore, you want to introduce our project?
Hello, everyone. I'm Professor Leonor Cadena. I teach in anthropology at Fullerton College. And this project is Fullerton College Anthropology Department Ancestral Memories Project. This project is funded by the Innovative Funds Grant. And Professor David Jacobson is our project manager. I'm a project coordinator. And the Fullerton College Anthropology Department was very excited to present the students with the opportunity to participate in this National Geographic project, Geno 2.0, Next Generation Helix Project. We gave the students a disclosure statement with the outlines of the terms of participation. All of the students have agreed to participate in this project and to submit their DNA to National Geographic, and then in turn, report their results to us. So in this video, we're going to be discussing the results of that project. So we'll start with Professor Jacobson.
Hello, so I'm Professor Jacobson, teach anthropology at Fullerton College. So I self-identify, my ancestry is just Caucasian. Prior to taking the Geographic project, doing the DNA results, I was told by my mother's from England, she's born in England. So I was told I was at least 50% English based on her ancestry. My father, on the other hand, was born here in the United States. However, he did tell me that he was Danish, the rest of his family was Danish, and they came from the northern areas, Norway, Denmark, and areas like that. So prior to that, that was kind of the information that I had. After actually submitting my DNA results to National Geographic's project, I wasn't too particularly surprised by them. From my results, the actual percentages that I got were 51% Northwestern Europe, pretty confirmed, 39% Eastern Europe, and then I got some pretty interesting neat ones, 6% Western Mediterranean, 2% Southwest Asian Persian Gulf, and then 2% Northeastern Europe, which I thought was pretty interesting. Professor Cadena?
Yes, so thank you for sharing that. I also did my DNA prior to this project, and I was born and raised in Mexico. Again, being Mexican, many people tend to claim Spanish ancestry. I studied indigenous people, so I wanted to be more Maya. So I was interested to see what kind of ancestry I would have, and I was pretty much confirmed with my results. One thing that did surprise me is that I had 15% Northern European, which again, I never thought I was British like Professor Jacobson, so I guess that was the thing that surprised me. My results indicated that 35% of my ancestry is from Southwestern Europe, 28% is North American and Andean, 15% is Northern Europe, 6% is African, 6% is from Western Mediterranean, and 5% is Jewish, 2% is Amazonian, South American, and 2% is Central Asia and Siberia. So again, the thing that surprised me the most was the ancestry to Northern Europe, but if you study Spanish history, you'll notice that in Spain, there were a lot of Jewish population, North African populations, and of course, British Isle populations. So I'm gonna ask you guys to also be muted until it's your turn to reduce the background noise. So now Geo.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
My mic's not covered. All right, cool. So yeah, I actually was previously a student at Fullerton College, and my name's Giovanna, you can call me Geo. And I actually studied anthropology for my bachelor's, as Professor Cadena mentioned, and communications for my master's. So currently living out in Germany as an expat, it's really interesting to review my DNA results again and to be part of this project. So really happy to be joining you guys. So I guess previously, before submitting this, I was kind of certain that my DNA must be mostly Latin American because I identify as Latina, even though I was born in the United States. My mother is, Mexican, and my father is actually born in the U.S., but pretty much fully Chilean, so from Chile in South America. He wasn't really raised in the US until later on in his life, and all of his family's from there. So I was really surprised when I received my results to see that I'm 52% Southwestern Europe, which I never really identified. Even though I'm white passing, I never really identified as white because my parents are so Latin American. I was just really not so invested in that, and especially in European culture, even though I had learned my history and I knew, of course, with colonization that I must have a lot of European DNA, but 52% was a big surprise. So that, and also, yeah, kind of like what my mom was saying, seeing 2% Central Asia and Siberia, I'm guessing that's from her side. I would love to see where my father's DNA is from as well, but those are kind of two of the ones that surprised me the most. And then I also got 4% Northern Africa, which I think is super cool. It's just really great, I guess, to see like what kind of a mix we all are. So yeah, pretty cool. I think Josie's next.
Josie.
Hi guys. Can you guys hear me through my mask?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So yeah, I'm Josie. I was also a student at Fullerton College. I studied with Professor Jacobson and Dr. Cadena. And when I heard about the project, I was very interested in joining it just because my family really takes pride in their European roots, which I don't really identify with. So when they told me that there was an opportunity to find out about my ancestry, I was just curious to how European I was, because obviously I'm nice and, caramel. So, when I got the results, I was very surprised to find out just how much of my ancestry was in Europe. I'm 37% Southwestern Europe and 43% North American and Andes. And then another thing that was very surprising for me, I remember both Professor Jacobson and Dr. Cadena talking about their Neanderthal ancestry. So I was very curious to see if I had any. And I actually have 1.7% Neanderthal in my DNA, which was awesome. I was like, yay! So, yeah.
Thank you. Stacy.
Hi, my name is Stacy. I was also a student for Professor Jacobson. I was curious to know about my DNA ancestry test. From what I've been told, I guess like if you could say I'm just Mexican. My mom's side, she's Spanish and Cuban, and my dad's side is Mexican. But I've always just told everyone I'm Mexican. But when I got my results, I got 30% North America, 25% Southwestern Europe, 20% Italy and Southern Europe, 8% Jewish diaspora, South American and Amazon 5%, Northeastern Europe 3%, West Mediterranean 3%, Southwest Asia 2%, and Eastern Africa 2%. So I was not expecting that at all. That was pretty cool. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. Chanel?
I forgot I muted myself. Hi, my name is Chanel Rose Leyva. I actually, I'm currently am an anthropology major, and I just recently transferred from Fullerton College, and I've taken classes from both Jacobson and Cadena. And this past spring is which I transferred, and I'll be studying at UCLA this fall, 2020, as an anthropology major. So this is exciting to have this type of project related to my major. So yay! So I identify as Filipino. And prior to submitting my DNA sample to National Geographic's Geographic project, I've been always curious about my background. I've wanted to know about my geographic and ancestral roots. As far as my origins, both my parents lived in the Philippines and moved to the United States back in the 80s. And so I learned from distant cousins and even my parents of their accounts of our ancestry. So my journey began kind of through word of mouth. And what I've learned is that we may have Italian, perhaps Colombian descendants. So with this curiosity, I wanted to participate in this project to provide a more clearer picture of my family tree. And so in addition, I was also taking an interest in genetics, and I had a class while I was doing this project. So it was nice to have that kind of overlap. So what I found out from my results is that I am 1.6% Neanderthal, and it said that I was 81% South China Sea, 13% Northeastern Asia, and 4% Melanesia and Australia. So I thought that was really exciting as well. I was also curious about the mitochondrial DNA, which they said I've matched with some famous scholars. And one of the scholars that I've matched with is someone named Petrarch, which is an Italian scholar. And I thought it was really cool. I didn't know much about him, so I did a little bit more of my independent research. So I was really surprised with my results. And what this project presented all the information, it was very explained in a non-scholarly and not really complicated way in which it's easy to comprehend for everybody. So yes.
Excellent, great. Thank you. Anna Carey.
Hello, everyone. Well, my name is Anna Carey. I go by AK, and I identify as a Mexican. Most recently, I started identifying as a white Mexican, just because I lived in Mexico for 10 years. And yeah, a lot of people do make the distinction. So I started accepting my privilege and just saying, okay, yeah, I'm a white Mexican. When I traveled to Europe, in every single country I went to, everyone told me, "Oh, you look like you're from here." So I obviously agreed with that because I knew that my mom is from Jalisco, and so Jalisco is where it was mostly conquered by. That's where the Spaniards went. That's where they landed. So I definitely knew that I had a lot of European blood in me. And my dad's family, I know that they were mostly from Mexico City. That's where he was born and raised with his mom, my grandmas. But I only know my grandmothers. I don't know any of my grandfathers. So all I knew was that I was Mexican, and that meant that I had a lot of European and maybe just a little bit of, hopefully more than I thought, of native Mexican. So I wasn't surprised when I heard that I have 46% Southwestern Europe and 15% from Italy and Southern Europe. So that completely makes sense, especially considering my complexion. And then I have 32% North American and Andes, and then 3% South America and Amazon. And then there's, what to my surprise, 2% Northern Africa. Which, based on what we learned in class, that we're basically all from Africa in some way, that didn't surprise me at all. But what did surprise me is when like also the Neanderthal blood, I was really curious about that too. And apparently I have 1.4%. So that was an interesting tidbit to learn. But yeah, overall, not really that surprised with my DNA results.
Excellent, great, thank you. Javier.
Hi everyone. So my name is Javier, even though like a lot of people pronounce Javier here, but the correct pronunciation is Javier. So I was born and raised in Indonesia, and I was told from my grandmother my ancestors were from China, and then they migrated to Indonesia because of the war. So I was so curious about my ancestor. So prior I took the test, I was thinking that I'm Chinese like 100%. But when I see the result, yeah, that's correct. My results was South China Sea 73% and Northeastern Asia 25%. So that was I expected before, but the thing that I need to know, like which part of the like South China Sea. South China Sea is very big, right? So there's a lot of tribes there. There's a lot of ethnicity. I was wondering like which any ethnicity, because in China there's a lot of like very diverse. So the results like was very common. Didn't give me like specific like ethnicity, but it answered my question though. So it was I expected before.
Excellent, thank you. Stephanie Beals.
Hello, everyone. I was a Fullerton College student, and Jacobson was my teacher for Anthro. And let me see. Well, I just moved to Texas. Basically, the results that I got, well, let's go before that. I had previously thought that I was just like half Mexican from my mom's side, and then like my dad's side is like British and German. So, oh, and I recently just found out that apparently my great grandfather was French. So, like, no one really talks about that because the French took over Mexico briefly. So it was kind of like shameful at the time. And basically, what I had got on my results was like 84% European, like every region, like every single region. It's crazy. And then I got like 14% North American and 2% Mediterranean. So I was pretty surprised. I didn't know it was like so little of North American.
Excellent, great, thank you. Maribel Baca.
Hi, well, my name is Maribel Baca, and I took anthropology with Professor Jacobson, and I took anthropology, cultural anthropology with Dr. Cardenas, Professor Cardenas, and I actually liked a lot anthropology. I never really wanted to take the class, but it was something I had to take, and I was glad I did because I learned a lot of stuff in both of the classes. And one thing that kept me in my mind was that we came from Africa, and I was like, well, I don't know if I'm descendant from Africa. It was kind of hard to understand that. And I was talking to my mom is that we're from Mexico, and she always talked how she had somebody in their family that came from Spain. So I was like, nice. So I'm a Spaniard and Mexico. I'm like, yes, I love it. And then my dad only says that he's Mexican and somewhere in his family, but he doesn't know how long. Somewhere he's from Spain too. And I was like, nice. And when I got the results, I was surprised that they told me I kind of have from Peruvian and Colombian backgrounds. And I was like, okay, interesting. I never expected that to come out. But my percentage of Western Europe is 37%, which I'm like, okay, I think Spain is in there, so good. Then North America and Andes is 36%. Jewish is 10%. I was like, wow, I have Jewish in me, which I love dancing, and Jewish is one of the dances I kind of like, Hebrew dancing. So I was like, yes, awesome. And then there's Eastern Europe, 7%, North Africa, 4%, which I learned in class. I was like, okay, there we go. And South America and Amazon, 2%, West Mediterranean, 2%. So I really like this combination in me because I like learning about other cultures. I have friends that they become so close to me like sisters. There's some from El Salvador, some from Brazil, and people mistake me when I start speaking like Salvadorian or Brazilian. Can I speak Portuguese? They think I'm Brazilian or Salvadorian. I'm like, no, I'm Mexican, but I like it. So I have a little bit of everything, which I really love. And I really love this project that we did. So thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you. So now we're going to ask questions to the whole group. And the first question I have, so feel free to address the question. First question is, what insights have you gained about your ancestry by participating in the study? Many of you guys already answered, you know, what you found interesting, what you didn't know, but what insights have you gained?
Well, I can add that I definitely kind of, well, the biggest insight that I gained was confirming the fact of my I guess, European side. That's why I'm so white, and why I'm white passing here in the United States. And also because I grew up here, so I have an accent, a neutral American accent. So then even when people hear me speak Spanish, it's like, you speak Spanish? I thought you were white. And I'm like, well, yeah, there's white Mexicans too. There's blonde Mexicans, there's blue-eyed Mexicans. Like, there's all kinds of Mexicans. There's not just dark-skinned, short guys with riding on a donkey. So, and that's kind of what I got when I was in Europe, and also in Israel. I was confused with Hebrew people. So I think that was my biggest insight, kind of just confirming, like, because that Israel is like, you know, towards the Mediterranean and also Italy. And so I understood, like, okay, I'm definitely picking up on the patterns of where my ancestors probably came from and how they ended up in Jalisco, which is where my mom is from, and also Mexico City, which is where the native Mexicans planted and started growing the city, started growing Mexico. So yeah, that was my biggest insight.
Anybody want to add anything else? Feel free to.
I would like to add something.
Sure, absolutely.
I had no idea I was Mediterranean. That was kind of interesting. I wonder what the story is behind that.
Yeah, I got Mediterranean as well. I was surprised, you know. I was like, oh, neat. And I didn't, you know, when I did the results, because I updated mine a little bit later as well, and I'm sure you guys did an update as well, and mine changed a little bit, which I thought was really neat. Excellent. Anybody else want to add anything?
Actually, I do. A lot of people, or especially my family that were from Mexico, Michoacan, they're always like, don't you like our music? I'm like, yeah, I do, but I'm more like tropical kind of thing. So I'm guessing by these results, I guess now why I'm more like tropical into the music or Hebrew dancing and Jewish like that. So I think it's because of these results I got. So that's a very interesting thing that I can understand more how I am, and not saying like, just because I'm Mexican, I have to love that kind of music. I hear everything, but it's just funny because my family's like, you have to like banda. I'm like, okay. So I'm like, no, I think I like a little bit of everything, and I love learning this whole background of me.
Wonderful. Anybody else want to add anything? No? Okay. So one of our next questions that we had was, what do your DNA results tell you about hominin migration patterns? Does anybody want to comment?
I would like to comment. Well, it's my understanding that even through gene flow and the mix of genetic diversity over time and all of our unique variation, I guess this project really boils down to how we really come from one species after all. It's just like over time we do have these variations, but through science, when we look far back into our history, it really does show that we're not so different after all. So it was a really nice eye-opener, and it gains a little perspective from this project.
Anybody want to add anything?
Yeah, I would like to add that I'm not really surprised by, because according to hominin migration patterns, it kind of makes sense to me, like thinking of the Pangea as well, and thinking of natives from South America and North America combined with the people that were transferring over from Europe. That was when the countries were already separate. So it kind of makes sense to me where South Americans would travel upwards and Europeans would travel westwards. So that was pretty interesting to me, kind of confirming that.
Anybody else?
I would like to add. So I think that's very confirming for my ethnicity. So I was told I'm Chinese, and then the result proved it. And then I think like the migration from my gene is because of like something like famine or war and something bad happened in China. So there are people from China that started to migrate to Southeast Asia, like Indonesia or Singapore. So which is right now I believe I didn't believe that before. I was I was thinking that was like something else, but when I see the result, I think I believe that right now. That's true.
Very good point. The next question we have is, what do your DNA results and your understanding of gene flow tell you about your genetic makeup?
I mean, I guess I could add, I know I've mentioned it several times already, but about my skin, because that was one of the biggest kind of insecurities a little when I was living in Mexico, because I moved there as a teen. So I was 14. I wanted to fit in, and people would just be like, "No, you're the gringa. You speak English, and you're white, so we're not going to talk to you, or you're snobby." And so that was like really hurtful to me. But I was like trying to understand how I ended up so pale. And both of my parents are pretty pale, and also their parents. So that kind of just, you know, confirms to me that I know that I have some friends, for example, that like I have my best friend, her mom is pretty pale and her dad is pretty dark skinned, and she came out super, super pale and her brother came out super, super dark. So that kind of just confirms to me that, you know, Mexicans, they can come out in all sorts of colors, but especially more from like European ancestry, that proves, you know, it's in my skin. It's shown. Yeah. So
So I wanted to add to what she's saying. I see it in my family. I have an uncle that he's like very light skinned, blue eyes. He's brother of my mom. My mom is like white, like with green eyes. And I wish I had those eyes, but I didn't get him. I wish my son was gonna get him, but he didn't. He got the white skin though from my mom, very white. That people think that my son his dad is really white and his dad is Mexican like me. But because that ancestry that we have from European, I guess that brings all that color of white. And my son is very, very white from his skin. That you could literally see his little veins. That's how white he is. The only bad thing is he didn't get the color eyes. I wished, but it's nice that to know all these things that we have. And now I understand why I like some certain type of music, and I'm a little bit different maybe to my family. And my sister, she's a little bit darker than me, and she's straight hair, and I have curly hair, even in the same family. So I guess the genes plays with what they want to give us at the end. And my brother's taller than us, and he's skinnier, and he looks more like in between the colors of white and dark. And so I was like, it's just a mixture, and it's wonderful to see different things that we could get through our new generations coming up.
I'd also like to share, I was really surprised too when I found out about the Southwestern Europe and Italy and Southern Europe. So my last name, and from what I've been told, is you pronounce it Botello, but a lot of people say, oh no, it's Botello. So I'm like, is it Botello? Is it Botello? So everyone's like, are you sure you're not Italian, or you don't have Italian ancestry or something? And from what I've known, not that I know of, but that was very like kind of eye-opening to me to see 20% of it. So that was pretty cool. I didn't know that at all.
That definitely tells you about the gene flow, right? In terms of genetic makeup, that's really fascinating. Anybody else before we move on to the next question? Okay, David.
All right. So the next question we have is, how do your DNA results, your ancestral migration patterns, and your understanding of gene flow help explain why Homo sapiens cannot be identified by simple racial or ethnic categories?
Oh, I'll add something, because I think we're all just super mixed, and everyone was surprised with their results. Everyone had something different that they hadn't heard of before. And so I just think we're so mixed that you can't really narrow it down.
Very true. Anybody want to add to that or comment?
Yeah, I'd like to add, like, especially from my experience that I was able to have from growing up in Texas, but then living in Mexico from 14 to 24 basically. I just moved back here to California where I was born last year. So I don't know, I feel like race in every country, they look at it differently. Like in Mexico, I was seen as the white girl, I was seen, especially because, not only because I spoke English, but because of my skin. And because, my mom is from Jalisco, which is where most of white Mexicans are from. And I do get a lot of, I guess, frustration at that, because there's like so much separation, so much segregation of like, no, you're the white Mexican, you're gonna go over there. And I'm like, no, I want to be everyone's friend, And then you come here and everyone's, like I said before, surprised when I speak Spanish, or, when my blonde Mexican friends speak Spanish, or, and it just kind of gets frustrating after a while to kind of have to live, it feels like a double life. And at the end of the day, we're all skin and bones. We're all flesh and blood. We're all humans. We all have a skeleton. So yeah, to me, it doesn't really make sense why people just kind of segregate each other and like, no, because you have this kind of skin color, you have this kind of hair, you have these kind of eyes, even like the favorable features that they're like, oh, you are pretty big. Like, I remember my first boyfriend, it was frustrating that he would say this. He would be like, oh, I loved that you had pale skin. That was the thing that called most of like that I liked you the most when I saw you. And I'm like, that's ridiculous. Why would you like me because of that? That's just how I was born. And then when I went back to Mexico during Christmas last year, I was in Puebla, which has a lot more darker skinned people because that's their heritage. It wasn't as, the Spaniards migrated downwards. And so when I was around there and I was like buying artisanry or like bracelets or whatever, they would tell me, oh yeah, this color looks pretty on you because you're so pale. I'm like, what? So it wouldn't look good on me if I weren't pale? Like, excuse me? So it kind of gets frustrating after a while. So I wish we could all just forget about the races thing.
Anybody want to add anything else?
I was actually thinking about that question before coming in to this interview. And I'm like, we really can't label ourselves a Mexican just because I was born there, or American because I've been living here for a long time. I think we just come from different roots. And that's the beauty of everyone that we have in each other. If I'm talking to Brazilians, and thank God I learned Portuguese, and they think I'm Brazilian just because I speak and I look like them. And I'm like, no, I'm Mexican. They're like, really? But you speak really good Portuguese and you look like a Brazilian girl. And I'm like, oh, well, thank you. But no, I do the same with the Salvadorian. And they think I'm a Salvadorian just because I kind of speak the way they do. And I'm like, it's beautiful that we just have these roots from everywhere. And we're just one person at the end. We're just, everybody is pretty much the same. We come pretty much from the same roots, different probably roots, but all the end they all go back to Africa, back to Europe. And that's the beauty. And we shouldn't, like she said, we shouldn't be labeling each other just you're white skin and you're dark skin. And we should treat everybody the same and equal because we're equal. We come from the same roots.
Anybody else? Well, I'd like to, before we get to the last question, I want to have a little, promote some considerations or invite you to consider the following. First of all, research is never completely free of biases and politics. And of course, the implications of this project include emotional and personal aspects because these questions are centering on kinship, which is one of the most, anthropologically speaking, one of the most important ways in which we as humans tend to classify. It also centers on aspects of race, on identity politics, and the politics of science, which are of course never divorced from the processes of science. Mark Johnson Guerrero at Ohio State University did some work within the UCLA Institute for Society and Genetic on the social impact of genetic tests like this one. And he proposes the following questions. Do you believe that we can choose our racial or our ethnic identities? Is there room to play with those identities? How much ancestry and lineage influence the choices that we make? What do we believe to be the most valid forms of knowledge around our ancestry, our lineage, and our heritage? Also, how is our DNA ancestry tested, connected to our communities, to our families? How valid is it? And it's not necessarily critiquing science of this project, but or the tests themselves, but the way that these tests are commercialized. And the tests are based on different regions, the influence they have in education, in opportunities, and in many aspects of socialization. For example, UC Berkeley sent a kit labeled Bring Your Genes to Cal, right? This program related to health, to risk factors regarding alcoholism. So if you think about the social implications and the historical concept of colonialism in the way that it affected indigenous communities, of course, this program was shut down because of all the prejudices that exist. Also, other considerations, DNA ancestry tests use a variety of factors, Y chromosome, mitochondrial DNA, autosomal DNA, or a combination of all of those. Tests are great at finding and confirming relationships, but when do relations equate to ancestry at a group level? Also, tests and algorithms are based on valid science, but only as good as who is already in the database. And most people don't realize that the majority of the database is based by people with European descent, which probably is why so many of us have so much European descent, because that's where they've done a lot of the collection of data. So this is not 100% free of biases. Also, the question of what is ancestry? I invite you to look at the work of Myra Washington at MYRASU. She's a media scholar who looks at videos, and she's done a lot of research on ancestry.com. And she invites us to think about the difference between culture and biology, right? You cannot claim the politics of identity politics, in other words. So the notion that some people claim to be something they don't look like, right? And how we monitor and in a way police how we identify ourselves and how society identifies us. Also, what she calls identity tourism, the notion that you are a mixture of identities. Thus, for some of us, we can pick and choose those identities that best suit us based on intersectionality and the context in which we are in. For example, oftentimes we privilege those identities that are socially more acceptable or that are privileged, that provide us the most privilege within a social context, within an environment. So being more, as we say in Spanish, güeritos, right, or lighter skin in a context of colonization is something that we tend to do. And it has nothing to do with any validity in terms of racial superiority. It's all constructed and based on politics. Also, and the importance of understanding how human migrations and colonization play a role on how we construct these identities. If you look at a map of the invasions of the Roman Empire, for example, for me, I have Jewish ancestry, I have Northern African ancestry, and of course, a lot of Spanish ancestry. And again, you probably can see my background. I'm going to be teaching in Sevilla in 2022, so I've been doing a lot of research on Spanish history. And if you look at Spanish history, the Jews were in Spain, the Moors were in Spain, but the kings of Castile, Fernando and Isabella, drove them out during the Inquisition. So, and this happened in a period of time in which, of course, affected these the gene flow effects in which all of us who have Spanish descent, because we're from Mexico or other parts of Latin America, we still inherited some, but again, the politics are important. And also remembering that borders change. We don't know how these results were determined in regards to borders, as they're arbitrary, and they move and shift, right? At one point, the Spanish people were Phoenicians, then they were Romans, then they became Spanish, right? Spain itself was a country that was divided and continues to be divided even as of now. And I think, Javier, you mentioned that, the political processes of colonization. So there's also there's always going to be controversy when we're looking at these classifications. I invite you to check out a commercial that was very controversial by Ancestry.com. It was about the ancestry of a slave. I think her name was Abigail Williams, and the reason why it was controversial is because Ancestry.com was promoting this idea that there was a romantic relationship between the slave owner and the African slave, which we know that was rarely the case. In most instances, there were a lot of rapes to African descended slaves. And that's the reason why this country had to have the rule of hypodescent, because we had a lot of people that looked white, yet they were still considered Black, right? So there's a lot of controversy on this. A lot of people who were adopted, for example, have been prey to these tests because they don't have any connection with their ancestry. So these tests make claims that, oh, we will tell you where you're from. What does that even mean, right? So the culture and its conflation with race. What about Native Americans and the politics within the Native Americans and identity? Or the politics of who gets to claim an identity, like Rachel Dolezal, right? Which, if you're not familiar with her, she is white who claims to be Black and wears dreads, and she's been very controversial as part of this cultural appropriation of Black culture. So for some people, she's a con artist. Other people say, well, if she has some ancestry that's from Africa, she has a right to identify herself. So taking all of these considerations, the last question I have for you, or we have for you, is now that you have reviewed your DNA test, what does this project tell you about race, racial categories, and the politics of science?
Go ahead.
Oh, is there someone? Sorry. You could go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say exactly what you mentioned about like choosing your heritage or choosing like your label. I kind of been trying to get back in touch with my, my Mexican roots, my native Mexican that were the ones that were oppressed, and I can't decide how much of my blood was from the oppressor and from how much was from the oppressed. I can't decide that. I just came out the way I am. I didn't choose to be born. So it really does tell me how much of, I don't know, it just makes me frustrated and upset when I think about how it's still going on in today's day and age, how there's still favorable colors, favorable eye colors, especially in Mexico, especially in places of more, Mexican, more native Mexican ancestry, where they didn't get that much, that colonized from the Spaniards or from French people or from all the people that ended up colonizing Mexico. I think even the Germans went there once, I don't remember. But it's I don't know, it tells me a lot about how people favor things that have nothing to do with good or bad. And they just end up, deciding, okay, well, you aren't like dark skin like me, so that means you must be, white, and you must be, you must have a lot of privilege. You must have, and I do. I'm not going to deny that I have privilege just from my skin color, and that is something that I will never be able to deny. So that's been teaching me a lot about today's like politics, especially in regards to elections as well. More light-skinned people are favored in Mexico. So there's never been like darker skinned candidates, and more light-skinned people are favored in media and in, I'm talking still about Mexico here, in media and movies, actors and actresses, most of the ones that get ahead are light-skinned. Also in sports, any kind of celebrity status, light skin is favored in Mexico. And so that just frustrates me over and over. And it's not only in Mexico, it's in the United States, it's in South America, in Central America. When I went to Costa Rica, I was called out like, where are you from? And I'm like, what? Why can't I be from here? And the guy told me, no, you're too white. So that kind of like, it strikes me as, normal, as well as I wish it would change. I wish we would go towards more of a, let's stop looking at our differences and start looking at our similarities.
Stephanie, do you want to come?
Yes. I was just gonna agree with that. I just think that we divide ourselves by very arbitrary like lines, and it just has gotten out of control where people will get angry at someone for what they look like and where they come from. And it's like we're from everywhere. It doesn't really matter. I mean, like it's just crazy how we divide ourselves in these racial lines or ethnic lines, and like what do you tell someone when they ask the rude question, what are you? Do they tell them the results that you got from this test, or how you grew up and what you experienced in your life and how you identified always? And that's pretty much it. That's all I got.
Anybody
Yeah,
else?
there are limitations to the test, as Professor Cadena and we discussed. One of the big ones is they only take a small portion of your DNA. It's not everything. It would take a long time. The other thing is we are comparing it to who has taken the test, the population, which is looks like a little bit over 1 million. So that's what we're comparing to. If we did worldwide, of course, everyone's results would change, very much so.
Right.
Anybody else like to comment?
I like to add. So I think racist is not only like in the US, in Indonesia too. I was born and raised in Indonesia, and then I'm Chinese, right? And then I was like the minority over there, and the Chinese Indonesian, they are suffering from being discriminated by native Indonesian. So I remember when I was a kid, like native Indonesian didn't want to play with me because my skin color, my eye is very small, and they told me that your eye is very small. So even though I was born in Indonesia and then I couldn't speak Chinese at all, and that still treat me like a Chinese, right? Like Chinese from immigrant, which is not right. So when I wanna like connect to my ancestor in China, I didn't know who my ancestors are because it was like 100 years ago. I didn't know that. And then if I go back to China, probably I didn't know how to like articulate with the culture and then speak the language. So I was really confused about my identity before. I'm Chinese Indonesian, so which means I am like my skill like Chinese, but the culture is like Indonesian. But in Indonesian itself, they don't accept me. And in China, if I go there, they probably don't accept me either. So I mean, like race, I think is problem. It's not only in the US, but it's everywhere.
I wanted to add that I think if everybody would do this kind of test and see the results, maybe the stereotype that is in people that just because you're from Mexico, you were born there, then they'll probably reject you or see you a certain way. Maybe if they knew where their roots come from, they will be accepting more acceptable of other people. And this will probably be way better than what is going on, especially with everything that we have right now going on. I think that would be a great, great thing for everybody to do and get a results and see where they come from. And still, even though this might not be exactly accurate, but we could have an idea where we come from. And I think we'll be better people and a better generation to come forward.
And this is where it's very, very important to educate our population on the history and the processes that have constructed these. I'd like to ask Giovanna to comment since she's in Germany. In Germany, they've done a very purposeful attempt to make sure that people in Germany know their history. So everybody's educated on the Holocaust from a very early age. Giovanna, would you like to comment on this question that we address, not just on that?
Yeah, sure. I have a lot of comments. I was just trying to wait for people to to go by on their turn. Definitely really interesting perspectives here, and it's really great to hear everyone's personal stories as well. I guess, yeah, since moving here, I obviously had a lot of questions. I moved here because my partner is German, so we met in the States, and then I ended up moving out here, and it's been almost 2 years that I've been living out here. And one of the biggest things I've learned is that it's really great how they educate from a very young age. I think the youngest is like 10 is when they start to talk about the Holocaust, and it's very strict, very clear that this should never happen again, and that Germans should obviously, you know, feel pretty bad about it, but also like educate others about it. I mean, it is something that I think you can connect to the U.S. history of decimation of Native American populations, and also slavery, of course, and what followed with, you know, still continuing oppression of African Americans and Black people. So, and people of color in general. So I just think it's interesting to connect it to that, and that a lot of people say, why should I feel bad about that if it's not something that I did, or that even my grandparents were part of? Like, okay, it was the ancestors, you know? But in Germany, they still say, look, this is something, maybe it's not our fault directly, but it's always something that should be taken very seriously. It's not something that should be made a joke out of. Any Jewish humor is absolutely not tolerated. And especially the what is that called? Like raising your arm, the Nazi salute, I guess you could call it, to say Heil Hitler. You know, that type of thing is absolutely not tolerated, and you can get fined and even jail time for that. So it's very interesting to compare with the times now that we're having in the United States, where, you know, we have these statues being taken down, which should have not ever been kept up for so long, of Confederate generals. And I could go on about this for days, but I think that's one thing that's important to note, is that, you know, despite whatever identity politics that are there, Germans themselves have realized, like, we are a huge mix of people, and we need to move forward into a new age, which is something that I think that's one of the things that attracted me a lot to moving to Europe, and a thing that they've learned very clearly, I think, in a lot of countries, is that now we're recognizing that there's so much diversity. There's so many refugees, for example, in Germany, and it's just a whole like mix of people that I didn't expect actually when I moved here, that I was surprised that it wasn't just like blonde, blue-eyed people everywhere like I thought, because I just thought of Germany in that way, and I had only ever been to the airport. So looking around at how many Turkish people are here, for example, and I've made a lot of Turkish friends who have told me, like, people question their identity constantly. I have a lot of also Black friends who are born in Germany, and they, you know, are just always questioned, like, are you really German? Or where are you really from? And what's your original ancestry? And they have like a term called Ausländer, which is like outsider. And they blame these people for the country's problems a lot. So, you know, it's not that different to the US blaming Mexicans, for example, for a lot of problems in California. So I think it's important I think some of the points that have been made about, you know, skin color, and that hopefully we can move past that and recognize that really all of us are not this ideal of perfection of whiteness that people still hold for some reason. But it's also important to recognize that, you know, this is something that has changed so much over time, and that it benefits you actually still, though, unfortunately, in society, to have these attributes of whiteness. And that is also a survival mechanism that a lot of people have. So it's something I wanted to share from my own personal background. When I was younger, I think my mom remembers this, as I one time was like, I'm not Latina. I was trying to be white passing as much as possible. I didn't want to recognize, like, I mean, my parents always wanted me to speak Spanish at home, for example. I really resisted that. My brother learned Spanish first, and I learned English first. So one thing we saw very clearly was that my brother was actually put into ESL classes, so English as a second language, and I wasn't. But they still quizzed me, and I was like, why am I here? My English is like perfect, you know, this is really weird. And also attempting to put us into like lower level classes immediately without like just judging on our last name or our parents' accents or whatever they might have noticed. So these are things that are unfortunately still happening. And so you know, people of color cannot just take off their skin color, and people are unfortunately judging them by that, even though they don't know what they are. So that's important. And I guess on the other point, I also could identify with AK in that I felt very discriminated against in terms of being too white and not fitting into any culture, because I was either not white enough or not Latina enough for certain environments. So it's very interesting, and that has escalated even more when I came to Germany, because I am proud of my heritage, and I do tell people that, and they're like, no, you're not Latina, and they just tell me what I am, and I'm like, okay, well, you don't know what I am. This is what I identify as, so you know, like I've had people be like, oh, well, you don't know how to make guacamole or tacos or whatever. And I'm like, okay, well, you can think what you want, but I mean, I don't understand what's your place to be judging my identity. And this is coming one time was from someone who's Black. And I'm like, I'm not going here and telling you you're not Black, like, because it's just crazy. I don't understand when people try to be the identity police, but in any case, that's something that I think we're going to constantly struggle with. I think everybody likes to judge others as humans. That's kind of how we are. But it would be nice to take from this that, yeah, like what we've said, that we're all mixed in that, and we have to continue spreading awareness about this, especially in the US with the Black Lives Matter movement and how we're realizing so many people are crawling out from under the rocks that are super conservative and judgmental people. So, yeah.
Thank you. Anybody else? Any other concluding thoughts? I do want to say that I want to remind us of the history of eugenics in this country and also in Germany. One of the dangers of this kind of work that is based on actual science and research is how people have misused science to promote eugenic ideas. So that's one thing whenever I teach about DNA tests and DNA studies, I want to caution people not to fall for what we call biological determinism, the notion that your genes are your destiny, right? And we see that re-emerging over and over again. And of course, what Giovanna was talking about in terms of Germany and the Nazi Holocaust is the epitome of this biological determinism. And sadly, history has a tendency to repeat itself. So we always have to be cautious of that. We always have to remember the politics of science and that people do science. Scientific method is great, except that people do it and people are innately biased. Any other comment?
I wanted to add on to what was just being said about also like making assumptions of somebody's background based off of not just what they look like, but from where they say they're from, like how they self-identify. So, for example, when I first came over here back to finish high school, I remember I told the person at the front desk at Fullerton, at the Wilshire Education Center for Adults, and it was really frustrating because as soon as I told her I'm from Mexico, and I told her, oh, I'm trying to get my high school done, so I'm gonna do the exam, just a one-time exam and get it over with. And she was like, but you said you're from Mexico. I'm like, yeah. She's like, oh, well, you need to have the intelligence for that. And I was like, excuse me? You have no idea what education is like in Mexico. You have no idea what you're talking about. Like, don't even go there. So, yeah, and I've gotten a lot of different types of comments like that just because they think they know where I'm from. They think they know what my heritage is just from looking at me or talking to me. If, you know, someone is surprised that I'm speaking Spanish, or when I'm speaking English in Mexico, it's like, you're just, you know, you're trying to be white. And I'm like, no, I was raised in Texas. I can't do anything about that. I didn't decide to be born in the United States. I didn't decide to be raised in Texas and be raised with this kind of accent. I didn't decide that. I didn't choose that. So why are people blaming it, you know, on us? And I understand where it comes from though. And so I'm not gonna invalidate it. I'm not gonna invalidate like your anger towards somebody that you think is an oppressor. I completely understand. I completely understand when people see me as a person that's privileged, even though they don't know my story. They don't know which privileges I did grow up with, which ones I didn't grow up with. Either way, just from what I look like, I am privileged. And just to come to terms with that and to accept that and to say, yeah, I am a white Mexican. So what? Like I didn't choose to be a white Mexican, but I can choose to going forward be different and help maybe my kids learn about it and my grandkids learn about it. And so we can continue to, each generation, like you say, so that history does not repeat itself, because it does tend to keep on repeating itself, especially I see in Mexican culture a lot of, you know, what we were talking about before, favoring white skin or colored eyes. Like my grandma, she had blue eyes growing up. She had green eyes. So growing up, she was very, like, she had a lot of suitors. And that was like a distinction for her. It was like, oh, she's the pale green-eyed one of the family, so everyone looked at her. And it's those things that are still happening today, and they need to change.
Any additional comments? Anybody have any additional comments or? No? Professor Cadena?
Well, we want to thank you for participating in this project. As we said earlier, it's something that Professor Jacobson and I took over, and then we got hit with the pandemic, and we were both struggling. So we know that we didn't give you guys a lot of time to prepare, and again, we kind of left it kind of hanging, but we really appreciate that you came. We appreciate your input and your contributions to this project. And we look forward to staying in touch with you. For some of you, it's so nice to see you. I've seen you in classes before. The rest of you, I would hope to stay in touch. So again, I want to thank you for the time that you took to share with us. Professor Jacobson?
Yeah, thank you so much, you guys. We really appreciate it. It's very much wonderful to see each and every one of you. If you guys do have any questions, you feel free to contact us anytime. Hopefully when everything resumes to normal operation, feel free to swing by. You know, we're always there for you. So, but thank you very much. It's a pleasure to see each and every one of you.
And we'll share the recording with you all.
We definitely will.
Thank you.
I'll see you guys later. Have a wonderful summer.
Bye.
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 Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Oh, Professor, I just had a question. You said that you could update the results. How can I do that?
What I did was, it was my very last update that they actually gave me. I received an email because the project was closing, and I went on there and I just downloaded the latest one, and it was an update from my previous one. That was all what it said, and this was going to be my last thing that I ever got. And so I did it, and I printed it, and that was it. I couldn't share it with anybody. I tried to share it with all of you guys, and I was unable to share it. I could only print.
So do you know if there's by any chance going to be more projects like this in the future, especially looking at more Native ancestry?
I don't know.
David, you might want to stop the recording.